combat aviation units on 3 continents. What can we learn from you to sustain our grit as stronglings?
I remember failing an instrument check ride and the sense of not just shame, but like mortification. I was completely not willing to accept failure at all, but it was also going to reflect on people's understanding of what women were capable of. The oldest member of our team decided, even before our first camp, to turn around. I remember he had tears in his eyes under his goggles, and it was a very difficult decision. And at that point, we had been climbing for like 12 hours on what should have been like a 7-hour day. I actually was hypothermic. And we're looking down on this weapons storage site. We're just starting to get ready to film it, and the sound in our helmets changes.
Okay.
It's the most lethal anti-aircraft system in the world. Backseater and I both pucker up just a bit. He says, "What do you want me to do, LT? Do you want me to break the hard deck?" And I said, "Hold tight." And as we wait for their reply...
Shannon, you were one of the first women to fly the Apache helicopter with the US Army. You've led combat aviation units on 3 continents, including NATO operations in Bosnia and command of a company in Korea's 2nd Infantry Division. You've led high-performance teams at Microsoft and summited Denali. You founded the Grit Institute, and you're the author of The Grit Factor with Harvard Business Review Press, and teach at Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business. My goal is to pull. What can we learn from you to sustain our grit as stronglings? Where I'd love to start is sitting here today, how would you describe the person?
Thanks, Hashan. It's great to be with you. I am now a mom of 2 boys who are in their tweens and teens, and I really believe over the last several decades of working in the world that we are here to serve and that we are here to contribute our absolute best selves to make the world a better place.
Amazing. I'm going to love unpacking that, especially the impact that we can drive to others and really pulling from your unique life-earned wisdom and experience. So it's going to be lovely. Maybe I'll start, really at the beginning. When was that moment for you when you really knew it's aviation, it's military? What was that moment for you?
Probably in college. I mean, I grew up in Alaska, so I had a lot of exposure to aviation. There's a huge amount of private aviation, especially in Alaska, out of necessity. But when I was in ROTC at Duke University, I had a chance to drill with a National Guard unit as part of my scholarship. And really that exposure and that opportunity to be really in depth in the aviation world was what really showed me the way that was the direction I wanted to go. That's
interesting. So in Alaska, of course, as someone who would love to eventually get there, absolutely, I've seen the avid use of commercial general aviation, for example. Sure. I'd love to hear, just growing up, what was your exposure to that world?
Yeah, I mean, you see it all the time. You see it all around you anytime you're heading to school or heading downtown to downtown Anchorage, which is relatively small. They're taking off from the lakes. There's a decade or 2 decades long wait list, I think, to get a parking spot on the lake at Lake Hood, for example. Okay. So it's really just everywhere. And it's because there are very few roads in Alaska. And so many places are only accessed by plane or boat and many just by plane. Right. And it really is just part of the fabric of what it is to live up there.
It sounds lovely, to be honest. I think it must have been really nice.
It's beautiful. It's
sure.
hard. It's a hard place to live, and it's also a beautiful place to live in ways that are hard to describe until you've spent time there.
I can completely imagine. And you grew up around aviation. It sparked an interest and a passion. How did that carry you? You mentioned it. You carried it with you to your university college studies, I believe, right?
Yes.
Where was that?
So Duke University is a university in North Carolina.
Okay. And how did that?
The country.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite the change.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How did your aviation interest evolve even further in your studies?
I want to pretend that there was this profound evolution. I think the reality is, in university we're pretty young, and so I was in my late teens, and I knew that once I had started ROTC, and I really loved the program. I loved being with other kids who had worked their whole lives, who also had this sense of service, greater than self, cadre or instructors who were also incredibly thoughtful and really worked to develop us as people and as leaders. And I wouldn't have been able to define it at that point, but I think that there was that love service connected to, frankly, this is a really cool thing that I can do for the next 8 years. And you don't know what 8 years is when you're 20 years old, right? You have no idea what you're signing up for.
That's a lifetime.
It's a lifetime, and it's nothing all at the same time. So I think it really was wanting to do the most interesting thing that I could do to pay back my obligation and then to move into this area of service and leadership that I had been prepared for with ROTC.
And actually, even on that note, so 20 pursuing ROTC and shape this for me. So you applied through ROTC with the degree program, or you started the academics and then applied to ROTC? How does that work?
I started the academics and then applied to ROTC, which is actually a little bit backwards from what most people do. I didn't think that I would have any interest in it, honestly. I just thought, hey, I'll try it. It might be a way to pay for college. And then I ended up really enjoying it, which completely surprised me. That was not at all what I thought my track would be when I was younger.
Okay. I can completely relate to the military as a form to get through academia.
Right.
Did it occur the gravity or the extent of the weight of responsibility that you would take on as an officer with the U.S. Army? Did that occur when you were applying at that age?
Probably not in the initial application. I think as you get closer to graduation, you were beginning to incur a deeper understanding. Of course, you don't really know what you're doing until you're out there doing it. But you know, and you know this from your own experience as well, that you take an oath, and it's an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I'm sure yours is similar but different, and relates to Canada. But that oath is a big deal, and we had a lot of conversations, of course, in professional development as an ROTC cadet. That this is potentially giving your life, and of course we've done our military history study and that sort of thing as well. So I think there is a sense of it, and at the same time, until you are out in your operational units, you don't fully internalize what that might mean.
Absolutely, I can completely see. There's quite a few assumptions, but it's founded on core values and beliefs.
Completely, yes.
So I can see aviation. You had applied for, would it be the aviation officer role, like right from the get-go?
Yes, so the assumption in ROTC is that you will be commissioned at your graduation. So I was commissioned as a second lieutenant the day before I graduated college.
And right from your application with ROTP, it was for the pilot aviation stream?
That's correct. I was branched aviation. So that meant when I started officer basic course, it was the aviation officer basic course down at Fort Rucker, Alabama. And we went straight from there into flight school, which is about a year, finished up another month of aviation officer basic course, and then we moved into our advanced aircraft transitions.
It's amazing, Jonah. I'm going to love picking at that, especially over the next few questions as well.
Great.
How about leadership? So you've talked about aviation. I can see that growing up in Anchorage in Alaska, carried over, ROTP, wanting to get into piloting. When did you see yourself as a leader and think, officer, ROTP makes sense to me? It aligns with who I am.
Yeah, I think that wasn't necessarily, again, a progressive thought pattern. But if I moved back even into high school, actually, if you moved back into junior high, I was very shy. When I moved into high school, I was an athlete. I was always a swimmer. I ran, I skied. I then became the swim team captain. I was the debate team captain. I ran the literary magazine. So I think in high school was really the time that I started to step into that role of being more comfortable, being in charge of things and running things and enjoying that process and seeing the opportunities in that. And so ROTC is absolutely meant to continue that process in all of us, or develop that if it hasn't yet been initiated, because that will be the expectation for all lieutenants and ultimately captains in the military.
Now I'm seeing it's really just bridging what you were already doing in that leadership space and kind of scaling that interest, which is really exciting. Did you know Rotary, Apache? Did you know that when you were going to apply, or?
Well, we know that it's almost certainly going to be Rotary Wing, because the Army pretty much only has Rotary Wing in the U.S. Army, except for the C-12s, which are like VIP and military intelligence, which wasn't that interesting to me at the time. Of course, it's much more useful in the civilian world, but that's not what you're interested in at 21.
Did you have thoughts of that? Maybe you do your military service and then maybe get out and continue as a helicopter pilot in the civilian world?
No,
or?
that never crossed my mind.
Really? That's
I was an
interesting.
English major. I was an English and art history major. I wanted to teach English.
Wow. There you go.
There you go.
You want to teach English and literature, and you're using Army aviation to get you there at the end of the day, which is amazing.
I mean, and really, I think it was disjointed completely. It was really like,
Right.
hey, I have this obligation. What is the most interesting way that I can fulfill this obligation? What's the coolest thing that I can do? I mean,
Right.
I'm 20, 21, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
how you think.
Right.
And I don't like to pretend that it was, again, much more profound, but it really wasn't. And and Apache's opened up to women in the spring that I graduated. And so they had previously not been open.
Oh, okay.
So when I knew that anything was available, that was
Right.
also really exciting. Like, hey, there's this cutting edge opportunity. And if I can qualify for this, then I have the opportunity to do
Right.
something new and particularly exciting.
So before that announcement, what
Yeah.
did you have your heart set on for rolling?
Blackhawks.
Blackhawks.
Yeah.
This is a really cool. So how long was your academic program?
4 years.
4 years. So you go 3.5 years
Yeah.
targeting Blackhawks. And
Yes.
in your last semester, Apaches open up.
Yes.
That's an exciting change, must be.
It is, and it was interesting because I went to get my assignment in the National Guard when I was still a cadet and, still just an ROTC, just a college student. And I remember reporting to the state aviation officer, and this was before combat exclusion was lifted just like a month before.
Okay.
And I remember this colonel sitting behind this huge desk and fancy office, and I was trying not to shake like a leaf. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "You realize you will never fly an attack helicopter."
Wow.
And, I knew he was, first of all, at the time, he was speaking the truth in terms of the policy, but he
Oh,
was
I see.
also just demonstrating power in not a particularly productive way. And,
Of course,
and there was nothing to say but yes, sir, right? And then when Congress changed the game on that colonel and everybody else, then suddenly there was, any opportunity was available as long as you earned it and asked for it.
Absolutely. Wow. So I'm contrasting it with my experience when I did my undergraduate with aviation here, getting my
Yeah.
pilot license. But my last year, we had, he was, I think, a senior director at one of the main airlines here. But he briefed us on the entry-level pilot salary at the time,
Right.
which I remember his words. And he was like, we are the highest paid entry-level salary pilot position for North America. And we were like, oh, this is great. We'd love to hear about this. And he shared it as 28,000 at the time. So, so we were, and this is after your 5 years of getting the 1,500 hours before you can get your ATPL and all of that. So to think that as a class, we were a little bit more discouraged.
Yeah.
And to think that from your last year, Apaches open up. Like, that's an amazing experience.
We did get paid less than 28,000. I'll just tell you
Sure.
when I started out, just to be clear. But
Sure.
but it wasn't about the pay, and I think that
Yeah.
is something that is also something that's so unique about military service, right? Is you're not going to go in there to make money or save much. I mean, you'll do your best, but
Of course.
but you're going to get by. But it's really the experience and the service that ends up being what matters the most. And I think that helped to set the stage in many ways for all the decisions that I would make to follow.
Absolutely. I can think it's such a formative moment
Yes.
in your life. And so even on that, in our prior conversation, I shared my interest in that Japanese practice, right?
Yes.
Called misogi, which I just actually came across myself, where once a year you take on a challenge so demanding that it shapes your mindset for the rest of the year. And this is obviously really built into the Ascend Mountain program that we run, and we want to get people to summit their first peak, for example.
Yes.
And on that same thread, I know you had some real formative years in Alaska, including an impressive summit attempt at Denali, which even the members on our program are hoping to do next year. So I'd love to hear that.
Sure.
But I'd like to know, along that same theme, how did that experience shape your grit and your mindset?
Looking back especially, and again, I was 19, so I signed up 3 weeks before the climb, and I had been training for another military school, so I'd been running, I'd been wearing the heavy pack, I'd been doing the kind of training that you would do before you climb a mountain like that.
So just to confirm, so you're 19, you're applying, or you've been accepted to ROTP?
I am in ROTC at the time.
Oh, you're in ROTC.
Yeah.
You're getting ready for, you just mentioned you were working up to an Army program.
An air assault school, yes.
Air assault school.
That's right. I'd done airborne school the year before. I was signed up for air assault school that would follow the Denali climb. Exactly.
Okay, so even that context is amazing. So you had finished airborne school.
Yes.
Static jumps, I'm assuming?
Static jumps, 5 static jumps out of a C-130.
Amazing. So airborne school, static jumps, got your jump wings through that. And now you're training up for air assault school.
Yes.
And we've had some, I remember some Canadian peers from my regiment had jumped in, had the privilege to go air assault. So I know how challenging that can be.
Yes.
And so you've got that in the pipeline, you're working up to it, and then you choose to you're going to go climb Denali as well.
Yeah, I was home in Alaska, of course, over summer break from college, and went to a Rotary Club meeting with my mother, who was a member. And the climb was mentioned, and they still had space for an additional climber. And it was a 60th anniversary Rotary Club climb. So we would have 2 guides, and there were 3 at the time, and then 4 with me, amateur climbers that would be going with them.
Okay, so your experience in climbing up to that point, what did that consist of?
I had hiked and backpacked with my dad a lot growing up, but that's kind of about it. And I'd done a little bit of rock climbing at a wall in North Carolina.
Okay, so amazing. So the guides did all the alpine skills training with you. I have images as we're obviously we're trying to get to Denali next year, but
exciting.
Oh, it's amazing. But I've seen images of toboggans, heavy backpacks being pulled uphill.
Yes.
And this is the first alpine peak experience you're pushing for.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. So walk me through that. How did that? If I remember right, you have to show up at like an airport, you get your kit and you fly in, or how did that work?
So we showed up. We did a couple of training hikes so the guides could get a feel for fitness and ability and that kind of thing. But they were really just hikes. I mean, they were strenuous, but Pioneer Peak in Alaska, for example, if any Alaskans are watching this.
Okay.
And it's 7,000 from 0 to sea level, so it's strenuous, but it's not technical. And so we showed up in Talkeetna, and Lowell Thomas Jr. was our pilot, who was a friend of ours from our church. He's a famous Alaskan pilot, and flew a heliocraft, which are very few of in Alaska, which is particularly large wingspan aircraft that takes off and lands on very short runways, basically. So good for this kind of thing. And we did a couple more crevasse rescue drills, like in the hangar we were in, and that was actually, I think, kind of the only real work that we did.
Sure.
And we, got on the airplane. I think there were 2 of us per flight, and flew into the mountain. And you fly in through, I think it's first shot pass, second shot pass, or last shot pass. Anyway, we're flying through where there's peaks like literally just off the wings of the aircraft. And you're just, like, even the flight in, you're sort of holding your breath. And then they dump you off on the Hilton Glacier. Base camp's at about 7,000 feet. And that's where you start. 7,000 to climb up to the 20,320.
And how many camps is that breaking down for you?
I think we camped... Gosh, it's been a while. I think we camped around 8,000, 11,000, 14,000, 17,000. So maybe 4 camps, not including base camp, so 5 in total. But in each of these cases, and this for your preparation and from your experience as well, you hike up or you're really hiking really on the lower glacier, right? With either snowshoes and then we put crampons on it at 11,000 feet. You deposit a cache of food because you're carrying so much equipment and food, bury it in the snow, come back down, and then that also helps you to acclimatize. And so that's part of the part of the work.
Acclimatization is its own battle in its own self.
Absolutely.
So what was give us an idea, the weight you were carrying on average, let's say?
Well, on average, the weight wasn't bad. I'll get you to the single carry was bad, but I think on average the weight was probably in the 30-pound range, and then you have you might have a couple of gallons of camp fuel or something on your sled, or you may have some additional supplies on your sled, but not prohibitively difficult until you get to the single carry. And the single carry is from around windy corners. So you go from 11,000 feet around up to 14,000 feet. It's extremely windy, hence the name, and very, very icy. And I remember when we did that section of the climb, I mean, the wind was so severe, it was just like ice chunks coming at your face. And the pack at that point, I remember it being 90 pounds. Now, perhaps
Sure.
what I remember is that the guide had to help to get it on my back. I couldn't stand up with it myself. And so it was excruciatingly heavy, and it felt like my abdominals were tearing, and we had to put extra padding on the waist strap so that we wouldn't rub our hip bones raw. It was pretty intense. That was an incredibly difficult day.
I can imagine. Talk me through the experience with the group you're with.
Yeah.
You're starting out, I'm sure morale is high.
Yes.
Everyone's in good spirits. Now the challenges are starting.
Yes.
Not just the physical challenges, the environmental challenges.
Yes.
How was that experience and with the other team members as you were getting up? And then the summit push, how did that go for your trip?
Yeah, it's a long, normally this is a 2-week climb for a standard ascent and descent. Usually the descent is about a day, or maybe 2 days, but really about a day.
Okay.
So we ended up being on the mountain for 3 weeks, and that was because of really harsh weather that came in at high camp. But prior to that point, the oldest member of our team, and again, we weren't really a team. Like, we didn't know each other before we showed up. We were all amateurs, right, going with guides. The oldest member of our team was from Arizona. He'd done a lot of high alpine trekking, but being on the glacier, going up the Kahiltna with these incredible peaks rising up on either side of you, everything is white, everything is, you hear the avalanches coming down off of Foraker.
Right.
And he decided, even before our first camp, to turn around, and that it was too much. It was too much for him to take. And I remember it was very sad. He was a little bit of an older man. I remember he had tears in his eyes under his goggles, and it was a very difficult decision. So he turned early. And then we were down to 3. There was two about 40-year-olds, one from Anchorage, one from Pennsylvania, and then myself. The second...
if you don't mind me asking, what was the reason he turned around? Was it...
He was overwhelmed psychologically.
Exhausted? Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it wasn't physical. It was psychological. He just looked... I mean, it is...
an
psychological... impressive place to be, and I think it's, again, the scale of Alaska is unimaginable if you haven't been there, frankly. Right. I mean, it's really like nothing else, and maybe Mongolia, but I've not been there.
Okay, so the one person that turned away, psychological challenges. So give me an idea. What was the psychological challenge? I'm sure it was being faced by multiple members on that team.
Yes. I think for him at that point, it was simply being in the environment and not being prepared for the scale of things and the perceived journey that was ahead. I think he had maybe had it in his head, but hadn't been able to fully internalize it, is my guess. I don't know. And unfortunately, of course, we had 3 more weeks on the mountain at that point, and so we did not get a chance to see him before he headed home.
So this was week 1. How many...
This is day 1.
Oh, day 1
This is
itself.
Day 1.
Okay, so there's... sorry.
Probably day 2. I think we had a night on the Kahiltna at base camp, and then we headed up the next day.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other members that were with you?
The other members, one of them, or all of us made it up to 14,000. So that's a camp where you acclimatize for several days typically, which is actually a really neat experience because there's climbers from all over the world that are there, and you play volleyball and all these, fun things to do to kind of get yourself acclimatized for the upper mountain. We did a climb to acclimatize and also to hold the highest rotary meeting at the time in the world at 16,000 feet.
Okay.
Came back down, and one of the remaining 2 men, besides the guide, started to feel really ill. And it turned out he had what they call acute mountain sickness. And so the rangers evaluated him and sent him down. Our assistant guide was running people up and down the mountain. So he really should get the credit for everything that the rest of us only did once.
These guides, what they do is unbelievable.
It is amazing. So then there were 3 of us. We headed up the head wall the second time to head to high camp. Head wall is a 60-degree slope between 14 and 16,000 feet. There's a fixed line. You're using a Jumar to go up that line. I mean, you're as a safety precaution only.
Of course.
And this last remaining person, besides the guide and me, started to have trouble on that second ascent of the head wall. So 2,000 feet on that line, we went very slowly. It was excruciating because he was really having a lot of challenges. So we got to the top of the head wall. The guide took everything out of this guy's pack, divided it between the guide's pack and my pack. And then we continued up that ridge to high camp where we would pitch a tent, build the walls around the tent, which you do to protect from wind. And at that point, we had been climbing for like 12 hours on what should have been like a 7-hour day.
Wow.
So I actually was hypothermic at that first night at high camp. the guide did all the things that you do, which is, make hot tang and put me in his sleeping bag with him. And by the morning I was fine. We had one summit attempt. Actually, let me back up. At that point, Chris, the second guy, other than the guide, was having searing headaches. And so he decided that he was likely at risk for high altitude cerebral edema, which is called HACE, which is pressure on the brain, and it has to be the only thing to do in that case is to descend. So the guide sent him down with another team, which was a little out of the realm of what was accepted, because technically we all should have descended with him. But I stayed up with the guide at high camp. We made a summit attempt. There was a storm. There were storms that were coming up in the afternoon, and so we had to turn around at 20,000 feet, which is only 300 feet shy of the summit, and hightail it back down to the 17,000 foot camp, which is something you have to do carefully, because it's a place that a lot of people fall. And then it's a long story, but I'll sum it up with saying there was another climber who was caught in that storm up on the upper mountain. His climbing partner from Poland came and stayed with us in our tent, which was completely fascinating and also helpful because we had run out of food. And so we had only a pack of dry strawberries, I think, and that was it. So this other climber from Poland who stayed with us had a lot of extra food, so we were able to share his food. He shared our tent. He shared the conversation with the guides about losing people on the mountain. And we made a second summit attempt and made it to the summit just before the storm came up that afternoon. We had like a minute on the summit, that was it, and had to get back down to high camp, and then descended with the other Polish climber. His friend was ultimately found, and unfortunately he lost both of his legs from the knees down, but was alive. And it was a pretty incredible and intense experience. And I think back to that time of our development in our brains and our bodies and ourselves and our understanding of ourselves. I think that those kind of crucible moments in that period of development are really important things. And I know there's many cultures that create this if you don't have this in some other way. And so I think in many ways that has shaped a lot of who I am and the confidence that I've had to go forward in other hard things in life.
I can imagine. I mean, so again, remind me, how old were you at this time?
I was 19.
19, and summiting one of the hardest mountains that we know, off plan with an extra week, having peers drop off, and being exposed to the harsh realities where members are losing limbs, for example.
Yes.
That is a lot to take in.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
And so when you walked away from that experience, you mentioned it, but if I were to pull on that thread a bit more, did you find that it reshaped your confidence in terms of what you might face next, perhaps in your path with the Army? Or it's that grit portion that I'm wondering about.
I think that it absolutely did, but I also don't know that I would have recognized it at the time. I mean, I think airborne school honestly helped to shape my confidence. I was completely terrified and thought I was going to die every single time I jumped out of an airplane. And then I started to skydive because I wanted to keep pushing myself into fear.
So you did a free fall with the military or outside?
That was outside of the military. It was civilian, And I went up through my advanced skydiving license, 135 jumps, which is actually not that many in the skydiving world, but allowed me to get my advanced license, jump at night, do all of those things. Amazing. And do a bunch of relative work, which is the formations that you do in the sky. And every single time that we went to altitude, I would say the Lord's Prayer. I would pray for everybody that I knew, and then I would jump. And so I developed this ritual, but I had this constant sense of like, this might be it. This might be it. I mean, you're jumping out of an airplane 13,000 feet up into the sky, right? So, and I won't pretend it was as scary as the first jump every time, but I did have this desire to keep pushing through that fear and to keep moving into that fear, because that was the only way through it ultimately. And I knew that there was confidence on the other side of that.
Okay, that's amazing. And I'm starting to see the connection and the progression to Apache pilot. This is starting to make sense, which is
I'm
good.
the oldest too, right? So I mean, that's probably all relevant. I think the oldest children, I don't know, my oldest boy is absolutely like this. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if he starts skydiving anytime soon, well, it could be an indicator, but
He hiked 1,200 miles by himself at age 14 on the PCT. So he's already started.
He started.
Okay,
it's in the blood. It's definitely in the blood.
That's right.
Which is amazing. your foray into military aviation. So walk us through that journey. You've graduated. You're now moving towards that Apache pilot seat, and so walk us through that journey leading up to day one as an Apache pilot.
Well, so the year prior to the advanced qualification course, again, was at Fort Rucker, Alabama, as part of the aviation officer basic course, and then going through the initial entry rotary wing course. And I started out in the Huey helicopter, the UH-1, moved to the AOH-58, which was the scout and attack track.
Right.
So that was the time that I knew that I was moving towards Apache. So I had requested and then had been assigned the scout and attack track, which is reconnaissance or attack.
Okay.
And that means that we move from Hueys into 58s, and then after the 58s, which are these small Jet Ranger helicopters, then we move into the advanced aircraft transition if we are assigned that. And so I had requested and earned the opportunity, and then was assigned to the Apache.
Okay, amazing. And so you're getting this is at the advanced level. So this
Yes.
was an advanced course.
Yes.
So you get through that. What was day one at the battalion like for you showing up?
Well, before I showed up, I had been riding in the bus with a couple of warrant officers, and those are our professional pilots who fly through their entire careers, right?
Okay.
And as a commissioned officer, we'll fly as lieutenants and captains, but then otherwise staff.
Right.
And so this warrant officer was on the bus on the way to the airfield, and I knew that there had been very few women who had qualified prior to that because they just opened it up. And I remember him looking around at his shoulder and saying, "Hey, where are you going after this LT?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to Fort Bragg." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I've got buddies up there. They said they were getting a female. They don't think you can hang in the field." And
This is
like,
on the bus drive.
Yep, I was on the bus.
Okay.
I was like, all right. So before I got to Fort Bragg, and this is the 18th Airborne Corps, so for us, that's the tip of the spear. It's ready to deploy anywhere in the world within
Right.
18 hours. And I was going to be a Corps support asset, which means that we had a mission of operating as an entire either battalion or regiment. So going deep over enemy lines, kind of in the Soviet era
Right.
sort of a tactics. And I had my hair cut short, almost as short as yours. I was
Okay.
going to give
Okay.
people no reason to say that I shouldn't be there, like
course.
nothing,
Right.
And I remember the first time we went to the field, and I grew up in Alaska, which nobody knows Alaska except for people in the north or
Right.
maybe people in Canada, right? So I was very comfortable backpacking. I'd climbed Denali. I'd done a lot of other types of adventures like this. But I remember I took my rucksack and I had my one flight suit. I took one change of underwear, one t-shirt, and like my toothbrush, and that was it. I was like, there is going to be nothing for them to say. And we got out to the field, set up the tents. And these guys in the battalion had all kinds of stuff, like
Of course.
chests full of food and like things they hung up. And I was like, my
Right.
God, like what in the world was the concern about this?
Okay, fair
And so, there was a lot of just being aware that the spotlight was on and that I needed to be excellent and I needed to exceed the standard and I needed to exceed any standard that I didn't know. And yet at the same time, I got there and I would always make sure I could max the PT test because again, you don't
Okay.
want to be the woman that can't max the PT test. Well, aviation is a very different thing than what you grew up in. And so,
Right.
so then I maxed the PT test, which I did every single PT test I ever took. And then there were guys that were like, "Oh, all she cares about is PT." And I was like, my God, you cannot win. And so you just keep showing up and you keep doing your best. And there's a lot of, when I look back on that time, there's a lot that was difficult because I was young. When
Sure.
you're young, you're dumb.
And a junior officer.
A junior officer
course.
anyway. I mean, junior
course.
officers anyway are trying to
Right.
find their way out of a wet paper bag, right?
Of course.
And so there's that, and then there's the additional knowledge that there is this kind of fishbowl around you and everything that you do, which is real. And so the kind of combination of things was very interesting. And I want to say too that there were some amazing people that I worked with. Some of the best guys I will ever know, most professional, most outstanding in the way that they
Right.
did their jobs. And there were some of the worst, right?
Absolutely,
So you get
yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
bell curve, any
Yeah.
kind of a large organization, and the same is true with aviation.
It's so interesting hearing your experience. It reminds me of any new recruit, and non-commissioned or officer. That day one, the pressure you put on yourself to perform, to not mess up, because
Yes.
you know that's going to follow you for years.
Yes.
So I can just imagine that pressure. And but as a side note, I have memories of infantry being in the field for weeks. doing the hard, sweaty stuff, being miserable. And I remember our Army aviation members coming in because we were practicing for an air insertion, for example. And it was just practicing. But, after we were going through all this arduous stuff, they got out, and I have a distinct memory. I have a feeling they did this just because we were there. But they opened up the tail cargo compartment and took out lawn chairs and beach umbrellas.
Oh my gosh.
And planted it down. And I distinctly remember a silent sigh taking place with all the rest of the comrades or the guys in the regiment. So.
But that's only the Chinook pilots and sometimes the Black Hawk pilots. It is never the Apache pilots.
Oh,
because we had no space. Not that we were above it. We just had no space. So we had to pretend to be above it.
Amazing.
The Chinooks always had the coolers in the back.
Okay, perfect. As I would.
As
Absolutely.
you would.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you had a gigantic cargo helicopter, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So we've talked about day one showing up. Grit, leadership, resilience starting very early. I'd like to shift to failure.
Yeah.
So as a strong link, stepping up, failure is a real possibility, publicly so.
Yes.
How have you faced and pulled through failure?
Gosh, so many times. I think, I will think back to like a check ride, for example, right? The check ride as a young lieutenant and knowing again that as the first woman to show up to fly the Apache in the 18th Airborne Corps, I'd better be really, really good at what I do. And so being sure that I was studying and I was working on my simulator and we had this thing called the TSTT, which was like a targeting thing for gunnery. Okay. And you could just do that on your own time. And I remember failing an instrument check ride. Okay. And the sense of not just shame, but like mortification. Because or I felt at least that was not just about me and my performance, which I was completely not willing to accept failure at all. But it was also going to reflect on people's understanding of what women were capable of. So you sort of carry this weight of this, right?
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And I think the guy that I was flying with was a phenomenal pilot and a phenomenal warrant officer. He did not think women should be there. He would say so, but not cruelly, just he was quite upfront about it. Oh, wow. But that doesn't make it easier.
It's more pressure though.
It's more pressure. And I think it was tough. And then I had a follow-up check ride, which is what happens if you fail a check ride. And most pilots have one of those at least in their history. And it went very well. But there was this sense of again, total mortification and self-doubt. And I had to learn at that point. And it's not that I'd never had to learn this before, but I think that was probably the most intense moment at the time, which was really to compartmentalize that, to put that over here and to focus in on that next check ride, to not let any of that emotion or that kind of over-analysis of things get in the way. And so I took the second check ride and it went fine. But still, there's always that piece then, right? There's always that piece that I think perfectionists or people who feel the weight of that requirement to be excellent, it stays with you.
It's interesting. At that point, how long were you in the Army for?
Oh, probably operationally after school.
After
school, probably 6 months or so.
6 months.
So it's just very early, right?
It's absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking back, even during my time as a warrant officer, and correct me if I'm wrong if it's the same on your end, but warrant officers took on almost a mentorship role for new officers. Was that similar for you?
They can.
They can. That's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
They are definitely in aviation, at least in Army aviation, they're a united front. They call themselves like the Wolf Pack, the Warrant Officer Liberation Front. Right. So you don't mess with the warrants.
Right. That's
There's also that. But they're technically, they are the technical experts. They are also strategically experts. They're truly experts at their field because they do this in every single tour, as opposed to the rest of us who come and go, right?
And I distinctly remember seeing junior officers come through and having them do particular tests or getting assessed on any particular operation or their mission planning or execution, the leadership and so on. And I remember as a warrant officer, it was expected. This member has 6 months in post-training, so they're still learning.
Yes.
And of course, all eyes are on the junior officer. Absolutely.
Yes.
They're going to be our leaders, right? So all eyes are there. But there's also, with that experience and wisdom, comes an understanding that there will be failures.
Yes.
And I remember from my end, you do look at the junior officers in terms of it's expected, it may happen, but how are they handling that failure?
Interesting.
I'm wondering from your end, did you feel like you were facing this with a whole bunch of eyes on you? And how did that look like?
You know, it's interesting to think back with that perspective. So I appreciate you offering that, because I don't think I was ever aware of that. I am sure that was happening.
Right.
But I was not aware of that. I was aware of my own mortification and my own assumption that I was being judged. And maybe I wasn't. I mean, to be honest, that could have been a lot of me. I think there's, as any young leader, as any leader at any stage, you have to be careful not to get in your own way. And I'm sure that I did get in my own way part of the time.
Right.
So it's entirely possible that they were like, yeah, the LT, just like every LT ever has this problem, and let's see how she does, and now let's see how she recovers. I mean, probably that's exactly what they were thinking, because they've all been around the block once or twice, right?
And they've failed in multiple things too.
And they have also failed. Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's right. And I think they were not 201, but almost 201, extraordinarily professional. I mean, they're there for the betterment of the unit and the betterment of aviation. And,
of course.
And that meant that they had to deal with these new lieutenants and come and go, right? They came and went. And I remember some of them coming in at one point being frustrated with another lieutenant that I really looked up to. He was more senior than I was. And thinking, gosh, this guy's an amazing officer, an amazing lieutenant. And realizing all of us mess up, and all of us are frustrating to people and get frustrated by people, and starting to understand a little bit more with a bit more maturity. Of course. Which was, I think, a relief at that point, because I had sometimes thought it was just me.
Oh, the internal mind games is a battle in itself. We talked about this, but I'd like to ask you, in your own words, could you explain to someone who doesn't know what is intent execution?
Yeah, for a commander's intent,
Absolutely.
right?
Working towards that end state and intent. For someone who doesn't know, and why that resonated with you, for example.
It's the strength of, as I understand it at least, it's the strength of Western armies in particular, because we operate with an operations order. When I was in, at least, there were 5 paragraphs. I think we added a 6th that was safety in the 90s.
Okay.
And the first, you have the situation and you have the mission, right? And part of that includes a statement of the commander's intent. And what that commander's intent does for us is to say, this is what the commander needs to get done. Now, here's the specific steps on how it's going to get done. But we know that a plan does not survive first contact, typically, with the enemy, right? So if there is something that happens, whether it's a mechanical failure or something that happens with an enemy force, if you're in that kind of a profile, the plan's not going to survive that. So you need to find a way to maneuver within the constraints of any rules of engagement that you might have and still meet that commander's intent, which allows for creativity, right?
And delegated decision-making at your level.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And that is powerful and a huge responsibility.
Right. Yeah. So being able to see what's on the ground, make decisions at your level. So what I'd like to do is intent execution, high stress, you've got to make a decision on your own, and you're dealing with that. What's a story you can share that came together?
Sure, Well, I would take you into Bosnia, and this was 1997. We were part of the NATO stabilization force, and this was just at the end of the war. As you know, wars don't often have real hard endings because people are still acting in their various ways down below or up above. And we were deployed to Bosnia as part of a force that was responsible for armed aerial reconnaissance of the Serbian heavy weapon storage sites.
For those that don't know, armed aerial reconnaissance.
So we're flying in teams of 2 Apaches. We're armed, so we have Hellfire missiles, and we have 30 millimeter high explosive in the cannon that's slung below the aircraft. The Apache is purely a weapons platform. That's pretty much its entire purpose in life. It has 2 seats. Both seats have to be occupied by pilots. So there's no crew chiefs on board. It's just the pilots, sort of like a fighter jet, and with slightly different setups. But our weapons configuration could include Hellfire missiles, 2.75-inch floating fin aerial rockets, and then the 30 millimeter high explosive So we were flying in Bosnia with both Hellfires and 30 millimeter high explosives. We were responsible for overflying these places that were essentially parking lots for heavy weapon systems, like tracked vehicles or wheeled vehicles that the Serbians had.
So armor, artillery,
artillery, exactly. And they had to keep them by the terms of the Dayton Peace Accords in these particular areas.
Oh, okay.
So our job was to go and fly over those areas and then take a videotape of that area and identify all of the vehicles that were in that area and then bring that videotape that was a special videotape that worked in the Apache back to the military intelligence folks at the battalion and the regiment. And then they would do something ostensibly intelligent with that and we would go fly another mission and do the same thing. So that was our mission in country.
Okay.
And this was one of our first missions that we flew. It was April, May timeframe. So Bosnia is, of course, Mediterranean, very hot during the day, gets cool at night, makes the infrared picture beautiful. Because these are heavy vehicles, that means that our navigation's also very easy because we just follow the roads. We don't have to figure out anything on terrain association on maps. You just follow the roads, the lines of communication, which is essentially roads. And we were flying north on the road out of Tuzla West at 300 feet, which was part of the rules of engagement that had been put in place immediately before we arrived. Now, 300 feet for a tactical helicopter is very high because typically we want to be in the trees, right? We're slow, we're low, we're sitting ducks essentially for any kind of surface to air or even handheld sort of a missile. Right. So we're flying at 300 feet.
Daytime, nighttime?
Nighttime, always infrared. Yeah, that's our tactical advantage. Again, the FLIR picture, the FLIR is the forward-looking infrared, was beautiful. Right. So it was easy navigation. Didn't like being at 300 feet, but that was the rule of engagement. We fly up, we come up to this high, they call it an out-of-ground effect hover, which means you're at a high hover so that it takes all of the energy of those two 1,850 horsepower jet engines to keep the helicopter up in the sky and puts you in a really dangerous position if you have a mechanical failure or a shot on the ground, right? So you're at this high out-of-ground effect hover, which is hard to recover from if you have a problem. And we're looking down on this weapons storage site. We're just starting to get ready to film it, and the sound in our helmets changes. And it's a sound we've only ever heard in the simulator before. It's the most lethal anti-aircraft system in the world. So my backseater and I both pucker up just a bit. He says, "What do you want me to do, LT? Do you want me to break the hard deck?" And I said, "Hold tight." And I called up...
Sorry, if I can ask. Beep's going off.
Yeah.
When you say it's the most lethal anti-air system in the world, what does that mean? It's you've detected it, or it's pointing at you?
It's pointing at us.
Okay.
So we're being tracked by this system, and that shows up on our...
Actively. Someone is actively
tracking us. Which is, by the way, against their rules of engagement. So,
it is against,
yes,
right? Absolutely.
That's not supposed to be happening.
Right.
So I call up to the controlling agency, which is responsible for all of the aviation and sector, and I said, "This is Blue Max 56, this is our location, we're at 300 feet. And as we wait for their reply, the sound in our helmets changes again. And now our threat radar tracking system tells us that we are not only being tracked, but we have been acquired by this same system. So if they fire, we're dead.
So the next step is fire.
The next step is fire, and we're done.
Right.
And
you're 200 somewhat feet above the tree line,
300,
exposed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're totally exposed.
Exposed, yeah.
And the controlling agency comes back on the radio and they say, "If you're nervous, you can return to station, but don't break the hard deck."
Wow, okay.
We were nervous.
Yeah,
we were nervous. And we had to make a decision in just a few moments, right? This is not about calling back to your commander and asking for their recommendations or their advice or their next orders. We had to make a decision in the moment. And what I knew is we had hours and hours of briefings over many days of the situation in the country. We knew that provocation was more likely than engagement. We knew that the hard deck was 300 feet, that if we broke it, we would be grounded and investigated and possibly sent home. We knew we had not completed the mission. And so in that moment, in order, and as you call it, this idea of intent, right? Meeting the commander's intent. We made the decision to reach over and turn down the volume. And that's the way that we flew the rest of the time in country.
Wow.
And again, I actually had an audience when I was keynoting for a company once get a little upset by that. And the reality is, we had to make the decision one way or the other. It was an informed decision, right? It was informed by experience in country, by briefings, by conversations, by all of the things that go into it. It could have been the wrong decision, but it's the kind of decision that you make in concert with the commander's intent relative to the mission that has to be accomplished.
And that's I think, the distinguishing factor that you just shared. some may have the assumption
Yes.
you're told to go reconnaissance the site.
Yes.
You're focused on just that, but
Yes.
you were briefed, and multiple times in so much context.
Yes.
The situation, the threat level, the antagonizing behaviors and habits from some of the forces in the area. So
Yes.
you were able to fall back on that.
Correct.
And I think that's a very critical component to intent execution.
Absolutely.
Making sure all the operators
Yes.
have that knowledge.
Yes, and I made a mistake later as a commander. I remember when I assigned a lieutenant a task, and we were doing some mission planning, and I said, hey, Lieutenant Lee, take this group of warrant officers, you guys go over and start planning the flight.
Right.
And I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm delegating, I'm allowing him to develop. And I remember one of my warrant officers came up to me and said, hey, ma'am, I don't think Lieutenant Lee understands yet how to do this.
Okay.
And so essentially, I hadn't given him that necessary context.
It's a good
right?
warrant officer.
It was a good warrant officer.
Yeah.
And so as a commander properly instructed, I went over and said, Lieutenant Lee, why don't we talk through this?
Okay.
And then you can lead the team. And so it was an important learning for me and something that clearly our commander in Bosnia had done. Yeah.
Amazing. So thank you for that, especially shaping intent execution. And what a story too. Like I can just imagine. I mean, from our end, when we did, I was focusing on dismounted reconnaissance and we were doing insertions. If we were above the tree line, it was nervous.
Oh yeah.
I can just imagine 200 feet with an anti-air system targeting you,
right,
with the next step being fire. That is a whole different level. So
well, it's all pretty dicey, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The stakes are high, let's just say, right?
Definitely.
That's right.
Definitely. So what I'd like to talk about now is, was there a moment when your values and the mission diverged, when staying meant compromising too much and leaving became the only honest choice?
And do you mean in terms of the military as a whole?
Military as a whole, career-wise, on your end. This falls back to when we had our discussion. Strong links sometimes are faced with different stressors.
Yes.
And they can come across that moment where they're not getting what they want out of their organization. They're not able to drive that impact.
Yeah.
And staying is just not. It's compromising too much internally.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you've had a moment like that.
Yeah, when I was stationed in Korea, I had taken command. I was a S4, which was a logistics officer first. I'd taken command of a company. We had started to draw down because we were going to be retiring the unit in order to get longbow Apaches. So there was a whole kind of inventory piece of that. And I remember taking leave to go. We had a month of leave. We could either go back to the States, but I was not married, and so I went down to Australia for a week and learned to scuba dive, and went to China because you've got to do that. Of course. Again, you're in your 20s, right? This is what you do. Right. And then I came back to the base, and I was stationed in Chuncheon in Korea, which was the farthest north deployed attack helicopter battalion. We were 10 kilometers south of the DMZ. It's a beautiful part of Korea. But it was a very small base, and that very small base had only our battalion and one company of military police on it, so tiny little base. And I remember walking back on that base after leave, coming back from leave, and seeing these connexes and seeing these little squat, white buildings that had been there for 50 years, and just feeling like there was nothing creative there for me anymore, like there was nothing that I wanted to do there. Okay. And I had been trying to look at those people who were senior to me and realizing that it wasn't the life that I wanted. It wasn't the experience that I wanted. Not being a warrant officer, as a commissioned officer, I would be going into staff after my command. And before I got out, I actually had an opportunity for a second command, and I had to decide at that point, really, no, I'm really moving on at this point. But I would say it was that moment coming back from leave, walking onto base, and just feeling like I was being crushed from the outside. Wow. Okay. And I put in my papers at that point.
Wow. It does sound like a bit of a crisis of identity, or maybe the confirmation of that cognitive dissonance, for example.
Yes.
So so you made the decision to leave, and even in the coming months of that, certainly I transitioned from outside the Army. I know plenty of members that have.
Yes.
And that can be a challenging time in itself.
For sure.
How was that for you?
So I transitioned through 2 years of a full-time program working towards my MBA at the Tech School at Dartmouth.
Okay.
And I would say that was an incredible gift for so many reasons, and primary among them that it was really difficult. It was really difficult to go from, as you know well, and anybody who's been military who's watching this knows well, or anyone who employs military people, you move from this place of really intense purpose and values-focused work. Even if you're not achieving those values, even if you fail in the attempt, even if you fail terribly or people around you fail terribly, you always know that those values are there and that is what you're supposed to be aiming for. And to leave that is hard.
Of course.
And we internalize those values if they weren't already ours. And I think it took me time to really get to the place where I was both willing and able to say, okay, it's my work to figure out my values and to figure out my purpose in life. And my purpose didn't end because I took off the uniform. And so I think those 2 years at Tuck really gave me that opportunity to not only get to know a huge swath of the corporate world and to be able to learn new things and struggle with accounting and decision science, but also to work through these feelings of this lost purpose. And I won't say I was graceful in that attempt always. I wasn't at all. And September 11th happened 2 weeks after I got out. So I had just started business school, and I just felt like I was in the wrong place. I mean, I was supposed to be responding to that because everyone I knew was responding to that, and I couldn't. I was doing spreadsheets, in an ivory tower campus. That's a very beautiful place in Hanover, New Hampshire, but it didn't feel like I was serving a purpose at that point. And it took a long time to come around to that.
I can imagine. I just realized, was there a moment that fed into this decision where you realized if you continued, you would not be flying anymore? Because that was a passion, I could tell.
Yeah.
Was there a moment like that?
Well, I knew that all along. I think once you get to the place where you've gone through your command, you're much closer to that place, right? So you're closer to that realization. I felt quite a bit in the military, and there were many reasons that I got out. One of the other reasons is I felt like in the capacity that I was operating, I had to act in a certain way, and I learned that way, and I was very good at it.
Right.
And I didn't feel like it was who I was.
Okay.
So I felt like I was giving up myself in order to be successful, and that would only continue. Right. And at some point, that became untenable.
That's what I was looking for. So it's actually similar to even my experience when I distinctly remember one of my last training events. We had, I think it was the brigade sergeant major and the brigade commander coming out, and they pulled me aside. And they said, at this point, Warren Korea, the time for you leading these attacks and soldiering is over. But it was with the best of intentions. Yes. They needed me to be a sergeant major, RSM, like continuing in that role. But I could tell that was not for me. That was not going to resonate with me. Yeah. And that kind of cemented my decision as well. So it's kind of an interesting...
Yes.
An interesting, where it deviated, right?
Yeah.
So there's factors there. There's what the organization's doing. That's what you're doing in terms of what lines up with your core values. What I'd like to ask is, from your perspective, what are organizations getting wrong that causes them to lose their strongest people? And what do leaders need to do differently to retain them, right? I'm sure your chain of command wanted to retain you, just like mine did, of course. They've invested in us, right? Sure. So not just the deviation in what we're doing, but as a whole, what are organizations doing wrong that's making them lose those strongest people?
It seems to me that the pace of leadership and the pace of management, especially in a world that is changing so rapidly, although I think this has always been the case, oftentimes means that leaders of organizations lose sight of taking care of their most important assets, which is their people, right? People are who get the mission done, and their strong links, the people that they need to stay and to really make the mission happen, are like every other human being, very complex and have needs that are professional and personal. And I learned this early on as a lieutenant, I will say. I remember this. As my 1st Battalion commander promoted me to 1st lieutenant, I remember him saying, the only good use of any increased power you will ever have is the increased responsibility to take care of your people. And I learned from him that leadership was a sacred trust. And I remember I had to get out of flight operations and out of company headquarters and walk down those hangar stairs and spend time in the crew chief office where the guys were that turned the wrenches and fixed the aircraft, right? The oily rags and the status of the aircraft up on the wall. And I had to get in there and ask questions and get to know them and walk out on the hangar floor because my job was to take care of them.
Right.
And to take care of them, I had to know them. And as you get to know them and you know that every single one of them, every person that works for you in an organization, no matter how junior or how senior, has hopes and dreams and ambitions and desires. And the job of a leader is to know that and to be able to understand that. And the best leaders that I have seen in the military and in the civilian world took that time, but I can only name 2 people.
Wow.
In one civilian, one military, who took the time to ask those questions, to advocate for me in my career trajectory. And that's over 15 years of that time. And so I think organizations are missing out on that opportunity and they're taking people for granted. And when you do that, and the challenge is your strong links can sustain that for a while, right? They'll continue to perform. And then at some point, as you're bringing out here in our conversation today, and I know that your studies are showing this to you as well, there's going to be a point where that no longer works. And oftentimes it's too late. And so I think the most important thing that organizations can do and that is not being done is a deep investment in their people. And that means, and I'm really grateful that this word is being used now, that the word love is being used, because it is about love. It's not the same kind of a love as your spouse or your child, but it is love of another human being where you care enough about that person to know what is going to make this person thrive? Where can they contribute their best self? And again, that goes back to what I truly believe that we are each here to do and that we each know that we need to do is contribute our best selves. And if we can't do that in all the different aspects of our lives, it's not going to be a sustainable place to stay.
I can completely resonate with that. And I think it's completely true that when that breaks, when that friction's there in the place of that investment and understanding and love, something else is going to fill it. And usually it's going to be something outside of that organization.
That's right.
But so building on that even more, those 2 people you mentioned, or it's a two-way street.
Yes.
So strong links are the people we count on to raise the bar and move the mission forward. Looking back on your career, who were the strong links that shaped your success, and what qualities did you see that made them stand out?
Yes. Well, I want to go back to that 1st Battalion commander to begin, and the comment that he made that stuck with me. I literally offer that in every keynote that I give to an organization because it's that important, and I know that it's not being done well in most cases. It just isn't. I think statistically. He was somebody who invested in his lieutenants. He invested in the officer professional development. He didn't spend a huge amount of time with us, but I knew that he believed in us. I knew he believed in me. And actually his wife was also a battalion commander, which was helpful, and an aviation battalion commander as well, which was helpful, I think. But I remember also that he would write notes to us. And I know I wasn't the only one, but I remember running a 10K one weekend and I got this note, from the battalion commander that said, hooah, great job on the 10K. So those sorts of things that were these personal connections and showed that he was paying attention.
Wow, yeah.
And then invested in us and our development and gave us the hard feedback and pushed us and challenged us to learn. So he was one of those strong links for sure for me. The second one, and I think this is important, and I could give you other examples as well, because this first opportunity as a platoon leader I was very fortunate to have that battalion commander and then a platoon sergeant. And the platoon sergeant works for me technically, but that platoon sergeant has been around for a long time and I have not. And so he knows that and I know that. And he was the best. I mean, he was the best Apache platoon sergeant that maybe ever walked the earth. He was incredible. And he would come to me with challenges. And if we disagreed, we would disagree behind closed doors. And then he would take the decision, if it was my decision that if I stuck with my original idea.
Right.
And he would go down and pretend it was his own. And he would make it happen without any question.
Amazing.
I mean, that was what we were doing. And there were times when he would come up and say, LT, you got to think about this. And I would say, my God, Sergeant C, you're right. You know, and we had this working relationship that was respectful and supportive, and he was willing to do the right thing no matter what. And I think that is what a strong link has to be able to do, is stand up for people, stand up for what is right, no matter what, no matter what the resistance. And there are not that many people in the world that do that. And I have come to respect them and value them intensely, because I find that a necessary trait.
Absolutely. And it sounds like a consistent, dependable level, unmatched in trust.
Yes.
That's an amazing thing, to have trust that your platoon sergeant, when he walks out that door and now he's engaging the rest of the team, is representing you to the fullest, even if he doesn't agree.
Exactly.
He's bought into that. And to have that trust behind a closed door is an amazing thing.
I mean, I don't know that I've ever experienced anything like that again.
Right.
I mean, it was beautiful. And I would work with Sergeant C on literally anything. The guy he could learn anything and do anything. And I know he's doing great things now.
And just listening to you talk about him, I would suspect you would go to the same lengths for him. And for
I would have done anything for him. Yeah. And for any soldier that I knew needed my help. And I learned that from him. I learned that from the battalion commander. I mean, I was at his son's baptism. His family was very dear and still professional. But I would have done anything for him.
Of course, it's a powerful
I still would.
bond.
I would this many years later.
Absolutely, and it sounds it stuck with you. It's shaped what you would see in a strong link and see those attributes in other members. So it's really impressive that has stuck with you for so long.
Well, I think it's important to bring up, in part because we learn from people who work for us just as much as we learn from people that we work for.
Absolutely.
And that's an opportunity that I think some people miss.
And I think even if I go back to the battalion commander, what I really want to pull from that and emphasize, it was quality. It didn't need to be quantity.
No, that's exactly right.
Which is an important lesson.
Absolutely,
right? Which is really impressive.
And handwrite notes. I think that's a really
I think that's
takeaway.
amazing, by the way.
There are a couple of pretty strong leaders, Indra Nui at Pepsi and CEO of Campbell's Soup, were known for writing notes. They wrote thousands and thousands of handwritten notes to people's parents, even, like that work for them at the corporate level. It matters.
It does.
It matters.
I'm reminded one of the speakers and a great colleague that I've interacted with. Dave Heim. He was a senior vice president at Boeing, and just an amazing character and leader, and spent decades in aviation. Continues post his retirement as well. But he shared the most important thing. I think his administrator at the time, when he was retiring, had collected all the notes and cards and everything that he had gotten. Wow. And, in the corporate world especially, you can get multiple accolades and prizes and frames and everything. But he doesn't know where any of those went. And he always shares this in his episode too. But that collection of notes stuck with him. And that represents the win. So I really like the handwritten approach, especially now with texting.
Especially now. I completely agree.
That's amazing. Yeah. I would like to pivot a little bit here.
Sure.
So trauma and tragedy, it's a fact of life. Even the previous speakers that have been on the podcast so far have shared it's a necessary reality. Yeah. And it's something we have to face. So I'd like to ask you, how have tragedy and trauma shaped your endurance and recovery as a strong link? And what's your key advice to someone that's just starting that path to recovery and facing tragedy right now? And they want to be that strong link and go back into work tomorrow
Yes.
and perform, but they're dealing with the weight of trauma and tragedy.
Yeah.
What would you have to share?
So I had been working at Microsoft for 6 months
Okay.
when my father and my stepmother were on a 16th anniversary trip in the Arctic in Alaska. And they were rafting the Hula Hula River, which is flows north from the Brooks Range out into the sea. And I was walking in the Portland market on a Sunday afternoon with my brother when my phone went off in my purse, and I just silenced it in my purse because we were walking in the market and there was no reason to answer a cell phone call. And I remember then at the end of our time together, we had some lunch. I got back in my car. I was living in Seattle, of course, working at Microsoft in Redmond. And I remember checking my cell phone and seeing a 907 area code in my text messages, which was somehow new at the time, 2005, and then followed by 911. And I knew 907 was Alaska. I knew my dad and Kathy were kayaking the Hula Hula River. I figured something had happened and I needed to know and would need to do something about it. So I called my brother, said, hey, I have this text message. I'm going to call the number, but why don't you jump in my car? And so he came over from his truck and got in the car. I called the number and it was the police in Kaktovik, Alaska, which is a tiny little Inuit village off of the northern coast. And the person on the phone asked if I was Richard and Kathy Huffman's daughter, and I said that I was. And he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but a bear came into their campsite last night and they were both killed.
Wow. And
in that moment, the entire world stopped. And for anybody who has experienced any kind of that kind of a call, everything stops. It's literally like everyone has stopped on the street, like there's nothing else happening in the world. And at the same time, a couple of minutes later, we had to start planning. And you just go into this mode of like, all right, there's things that need to be done. I need to coordinate to have the bodies shipped to Anchorage. I need to coordinate for a funeral. I need to get myself to Alaska. I'm gonna have to take care of the house. Like all of a sudden, your brains just starts to move.
Okay.
And so I started driving north to Seattle. My brother came with me, I think, to fly up to Anchorage and made all of the calls then. I had to call to inform the rest of the family. I had to call. Wow. My mom, who was, my father's ex-wife, and every single person I would call and say, and I felt like I had to comfort them, right? Even though I was my dad's daughter. And so that week we had the funeral at the church. They're buried in a rural cemetery in Alaska, which is a very powerful thing. It's completely different than a regular burial, very raw. Right. And then at that point, I remember my boss at Microsoft said, if you want to come back to work next week, that's great. And if you need to take more time, you take as much time as you need. If you need to take, and I figured I'd have to quit because, I had to sell everything in the house. I had to sell the house. We had to sell the cars. We had to do all of this stuff that has to happen when a household is suddenly and unexpectedly gone. We'd been living there since I was 10 years old. And so, I had to take a few months. And I remember my boss at Microsoft saying, whenever you come back, your job is here. Wow. You don't need to worry about a thing. Which is inconceivable in most places, right? I mean, you'd have to quit because there's just too much to be done. And I also remember at the funeral, our old priest, so we're Episcopalian, and I'd grown up with this priest, and I remember him saying, you think that things are hard now, but they're going to be much harder in 6 weeks. Wow. Because the shock will wear off and people will be gone. And so I remember being aware that I needed to think of myself as a project. And this is what I would offer to those who might be in the midst of this or have somebody that they know in the midst of this. So and this is very much against my nature, I signed up for a grief group. I signed up with a counselor. And I was like, I need to build the scaffolding so that I don't fall apart, basically. Because you still need to live your life. And and I was unmarried at that point. I was single. So I went back to Seattle. Ultimately, I got cats, which I still have a 20-year-old cat. Actually, my dad and stepmom have been gone 20 years this week. And And I signed up to sing the Mozart Requiem with the Seattle Symphony. Signed up meaning I auditioned and was accepted. And my father sang, and I have sung also, and had a chance to sing the Mozart Requiem with Itzhak Perlman conducting in memory of my dad. For me, I mean, not of course for the symphony, but for me, that's what that was. And then the year after, I took the same trip that they had taken, and I write about this in my memoir, North of Hope. I wanted to go back and see where they had died. I wanted to finish the trip that they had been unable to finish. And so I think for me, what was important was to build the scaffolding around myself so that I wouldn't fall apart.
Right.
And I was very fortunate to have a work environment that supported whatever I needed and actually put me into a job that was a better fit for me when I came back from that time up in Alaska.
Yeah.
And I picked things on the horizon that would allow me to do something that was a ritual of remembrance, which I think is also a really powerful and important thing. If you don't have that in a faith tradition, I think you've got to create that. I do. I think within my faith tradition have that, but also wanted to do these other things that were markers of remembrance. And I think all of those things are important as we make our way through those times of our lives.
Of course. And so it's certainly, thank you for sharing. It's a heartbreaking story. And members, I'm sure listeners that are going through that or have been through it.
Yes.
You know, even through my past traumas as well, like I can't imagine how difficult it was to build that scaffolding and ask for support, which is some of the biggest challenges.
Yes.
I think I shared with you, when a senior NCO retires, in particular from my trade, infantry in the Army, it's a common practice to make sure there's a support structure because so much can come out, and it's a dangerous and challenging time.
Right.
And it's such a hard thing to do, to build that scaffolding so that you can prop yourself up to then regain that stature and get your 2 feet back on the ground. So I can just imagine.
And for yourself and for anyone who is fitting the profile of what it is that you're doing this work around with Strong Links, we're used to doing things for ourselves and by ourselves and getting through it. And I think that I knew that I needed to have help. That I would need to, and I needed to make sure that and so in a way you can feel good about preparing yourself for the help that you're going to need, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and the idea of scaffolding, I think of as important if you are a leader, by the way, with other leaders you're developing, or with children, or with anybody that you want to be able to maneuver within the commander's intent. You want to build the scaffolding so that they maneuver and they don't fall off the cliff. Right? So you give them enough scaffolding that they can make mistakes, they can fail, they can learn, they can grow, they can get through grief, they can get through trauma. But they have the support they need to continue to get stronger and to improve. And so that scaffolding idea, I think, is a powerful one.
I think it's a powerful one, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the superior at Microsoft,
enabling
that level of psychological safety for you, I think
incredible.
It set the foundation for you to build that scaffolding.
Absolutely.
And that's something leaders, business organizational leaders can do for their members, which is so powerful and retains their strong links, right?
100%.
It's really, really powerful.
Yes.
So thank you again for sharing that story. It's something I think a lot of us can relate to.
Yes.
If I were to kind of expand on the burdens side of things, Strong Links often carry these unseen burdens, whether it's sacrificing well-being, recognition, and relationships to hold the line.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself in that cycle of sacrifice to hold that line? And what would your most important advice be for someone experiencing that same sacrifice to maintain things, and it's to their detriment?
Yes. I think we do this all the time.
Right.
I am starting to get better, and I've now lived enough years that I feel like I better start getting better, because it's an important thing to ideally gain wisdom over time. And I know that in everything that I do, I expect to give my best, and I will give that at the detriment of physical health and mental health. And sometimes that means now, because I have a family, right? anything that you do that doesn't take care of yourself means that you don't take care of your family as well. And so I think for me, that's been a realization also, is that when you make a commitment to something, there will be sacrifices that come along with it out of necessity, and you need to put boundaries on those things. So I was thinking, for various reasons today, but of how it's so important to think about those things that you need to be able to be your best and to show up as your best. And that should include some kind of exercise, that should include good nutrition, that should include good sleep, that should include good relationships, so whatever you need to do to maintain those relationships. And it might include something that is a passion outside of your work, right? Let's say it's painting or reading or writing or something like that. And playing pickleball is a big thing now, right? Well, whatever that thing is, that's your thing. And make sure that you schedule that in. And then you can give your best to what it is that you're doing. But it's very, very hard to do if you let that go for too long. And it's very easy to allow small sacrifices to become large sacrifices because you don't rein them in quickly. There is some that is going to be necessary when you're starting out, because that's part of the work. And there are times when it's going to be necessary as well. And so there's some wisdom that comes from experience of knowing, I think, okay, there's going to be a time that I'm going to have to push really hard. And that's going to mean there's going to be something that falls away on the edges. But I need to put boundaries on that time. Let's say I'm going to assess at the end of this month, and I'm going to force myself to sit down with my spouse or my partner or my colleagues, my business colleagues, and discuss how those boundaries need to be put back in place. So put those boundaries formally in place and then find a way to check in on those. I think that is a really potentially helpful thing for people who have a tendency to push themselves hard.
I just because of our last question, the word that keeps resonating is scaffolding. Like these sound like all attributes to allow us to maintain that performance as a strong link to drive that mission forward. So that self-care, active self-care. It's it's a form of scaffolding, which is interesting. So I think that's really powerful.
And I am still terrible at it, by the way, just to be clear.
Sure.
So
not a problem.
So that's right.
So we've learned so much on your shared journey and wisdom. And I think there is one attribute that I'd like to, one of my closing points to pull from you. And really, I think it's the story embodied in parenting. And so what I'd like to ask, as a mother of two boys, how has parenting helped you face traumas and in turn shaped your resilience as a strong link?
Parenting is the hardest job anyone will ever have.
Okay.
Apaches have nothing on it.
Wow. Okay.
Deployments have nothing on it. It is all in all the time, and there is no rest. And it is also the most beautiful thing. And I would say that any journey, anything that we do in this world, anything that we contribute in this world of value is going to be hard. And parenting is the most beautiful thing, I believe, and it is also the hardest thing. And but I don't say it's hard without being beautiful. It is both of those things. And I think I have a greater appreciation of the marriage of those two things. For sure with parenting, it is relentless, right? It doesn't ever stop. It is also relentlessly beautiful, and that doesn't ever stop. It is relentlessly painful, and that doesn't ever stop. And it makes you humble in a way that nothing else will. And so in that sense, I think that you have to be resilient because you have no choice. I mean, it's for beings that came into the world because you brought them in, or you adopted them, or you for some reason you're in charge of them. And I think the resilience is necessary, as is and I think this is where I have learned more than anything else the necessity of saying, I've got to go out and get a walk in or get a workout in. I mean, and I have not done that well for the early parts of my son's lives. Now they're tweens and teens again, so they don't think they can, but they can handle an hour without me or more. I think that it has helped to underscore lessons that I have learned in every other part of my life in an even more intense and more important way. And I don't think that other things in life don't have value. They all have value, but for sure, our impact in our children's lives, I think, is the most important thing that we leave in this world if we're blessed to have them. And I know there's other ways that we contribute as well that are also important, but it's been a journey of, and continues to be a journey of learning and humility more than anything else. And maybe that is, and needing to ask for help at times, right? I think that humility is something that doesn't always, it doesn't come naturally if you are a strong link. It doesn't come naturally if you're the one that gets stuff done and you make it happen. And at some point you realize this is not in my control, and you have to let go of it and let things happen. And that is something I will be learning for a very long time.
It's really interesting. Even listening to it, I can feel the resilience. I can feel the strength that comes from parenting and that support structure as well. And it's just reminded me, with the mountaineering events that we do, there's a colleague, Rob Francis, he's the CEO of the Canadian Leadership Company, and he would not call himself a mountaineer. He can out-mountaineer anyone I know right now. But he's such a family person. And now, listening to you, it reminds me of the same kind of resilience I see in him. And it's exciting because even a week from now when we do the next event, it'll be the first time that we get him and his son to summit their first mountain.
So exciting.
So it's really interesting. But
the other thing it does, I would say, that is also very relevant is that parenting requires you, if you're willing to accept the challenge, to decide on those few things that are really and truly important. And then be willing to go to bat for them no matter what. And it is a no matter what. Like right now we're starting a new school because our youngest son needs something different. And there's tremendous pushback, if you're not going the standard route in education. I don't know why it's like that. But you know what? It's our son. And I don't care what anybody says. We're going to do the thing that he needs because that's what we do. And you realize, that we had to pick those things, like what's important. I'm like, family is important, faith is important, music in our family is important, wilderness is important, and they will have those things, and they will read classics, not just the stuff that they're given anymore. And so you decide what are those things that are really important, and then you make those the priority. And if you don't, then they won't happen.
Listening to that, I believe this resonates with the attributes you've built into your Grit Institute.
Yes.
The purpose, identity, and story.
Completely.
To be able to fall back on.
That's the foundation of grit and resilience, right? In all of the research that I did and all of the work that came out of the years of interviews and is really this foundation of the grit triad is owning our story and connecting to core purpose. And it's hard work, it's deep work. And then the commitment to that is also hard work, but it's also where life really has meaning and value and purpose. And I think our work in our organizations, in our communities, and in our world also resonate when we really commit to what matters the most.
I think it's a really powerful note. To bring the interview to a close, those that want and see themselves as strong links, that want to be that critical enabler, that are facing their own levels of power stress, that are looking at this cycle of sacrifice, they want to build their scaffolding, maybe they're experiencing a moment of tragedy and they're trying to find their way through that. There are those difficulties. What's the most important advice that you would give them?
I would spend some time and determine those things that are most important to you. Like not to your organization, but to you, Ashan, or to you, anybody who's listening who needs to hear this. And narrow it down to 3 to 5. And then maybe narrow it down if you're really in a difficult time, you narrow it down to 1, right? 1 to 2. And focus in on those things. And that's where I think we have this opportunity to tether ourselves to this core purpose or this heart purpose. I think of it as not just your why, but it's your deeper than why, right? It's your core purpose. It's grounded in values. It's grounded in what makes you who you are. And tether yourself to that. Come back to it every single day and make sure that anything that you do, any decision that you make is in alignment with that. And if you do that, I think you can start to rebuild into a place of strength and back into that place of the grit factor.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and such a foundational attribute.
Absolutely.
I can see.
Yes.
The second question is to those leaders,
yes.
the organizational leaders in the military and the civilian sector who have these members who are those strong links, and
yes.
they want to impart that level of love, that
yes.
level of support. And they want to maybe scale the number of strong links in their team because it's
Yes.
an exponential benefit to their organization.
Absolutely.
But these leaders are stressed. They are overwhelmed, and if any number of reasons to hold back from investing in those members. There's so many good reasons. For example, what would your most important advice be to them that want to scale those strong links?
You know, they have to decide, they have to commit to invest in their people. They have to. And they have to commit to giving their people time to invest in themselves. It's why I take companies through the 6-week training at the Grid Institute, where we start to focus on story and purpose. Almost nobody gives themselves time to do that.
Right.
That's just the beginning. I mean, that's just the beginning. Then we go into the second and the third legs of the triad. But until you do that work, and until these people within organizations do that work, they're not going to be able to show up as the strong links that are needed.
Right.
Once they do that work, and once you build that into the framework of professional development within the company, within the framework of mentorship, the framework of succession, that's when you start to really see the benefits, and you start to see the strength that comes from that work, that deep inner work, being brought into the company. And I think there's incredible opportunity there. It's never been more important than it is today. There's really good studies on the volatility in the workplace that has been sort of endemic since COVID, really. And one of the things that comes out of those studies again and again is that need to connect to our individual purpose and then make that connection to the organizational purpose. So we come back to, you have to commit to investing in your people at any cost. And that's where that strength will come.
Okay. Really powerful advice.
Yeah.
Last question, top 2 books. What would you recommend?
I'm going to give you 2 books that will probably not be the same as anybody else that you asked that question to.
Amazing.
Partially, I believe that we have to read widely in many genres. So I'm going to say the first one might be expected. It's Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott.
Okay.
If you are a strong link, if you are leading an organization through challenge and change, and if you're leading an organization at all, then you are leading through challenge and change right now. You're going to have a lot of hard conversations, and you have to face into them. And Fierce Conversations gives you the tools to do that.
Okay.
So that's the first.
Amazing.
The second one is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo.
Okay.
And that's because strength has to be hand in hand with mercy and with love. And until we learn that, we'll never have the organizations that we want. And we'll never be able to build the organizations that can be everything they can be.
Yeah, a contrasting duality, but so much truth in that. That's an amazing insight.
You have to expect that from an English major.
Of course. It's coming back to that, which is amazing.
Coming back to that. There you go.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here and share your insight with us. I can't share how happy I am that you took the time to come out. Absolutely.
Well, I love this conversation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Shannon.
Thank you.
Perfect.